So, Paddington in Peru is the third Paddington movie. And, it's a big challenge to, live up to the wonder and the just like the general warmth that was Paddington 2. But I think, I will say this Paddington in Peru, it is not as good as Paddington 2. But I do think, because I absolutely loved Paddington 2. I think it was like my number like 2 favorite film of that year when it came out. But I think what is more fascinating about this third film is how well just that whimsy and charm of Paddington can still stay strong within a premise that has been very worn and weary and could just, be a very uninteresting type of adventure. Because the premise is that Paddington now has to travel to Peru because he's worried about his Aunt Lucy. But when he arrives, he discovers that Aunt Lucy has gone missing in the jungle, and where they have to find the lost city of gold. And, it's a typical treasure hunting adventure, and it doesn't sound that interesting on its face. But, I figured, what, if they can still pull off the charm that Paddington 2 had, which just, Paddington, once again, voiced by Ben Whishaw, just making him lovable and just trying to see the best in people and just trying to be there for others and trying to defeat villains with his typical kind of Chaplin style of slapstick humor. I think the film could still work. It could still be fairly fun, if not very original. And to a little bit of my surprise, it does. I still found myself really enjoying Paddington's antics, especially for the way that he weaves the Brown family into the mix by always giving them something to do. I think that was kind of an interesting feat of the past Paddington film, was that they even though it's mostly just Paddington trying to escape from prison and trying to clear his name, the Brown family is still present and not just kind of off to the side. It feels like they always have something important to do in the current adventure. And they do here. I mean, you have Hugh Bonneville, once again, playing Henry Brown. This time his goal is to become more adventurous. You have Emily Mortimer playing Mary Brown. Her goal for all this is to, have one more good outing with her family before her kids grow up and move out, and that she potentially loses Paddington as well. And then the kids all have their own little quirks and their own little inventions that they add to the mix as well. And I do think, much like Paddington 2, the villain does become an interesting character here. He's played by Antonio Banderas, who is someone who's tried to put that life of treasure hunting behind him, but he's still bound by trying to find this gold and is haunted by the ghosts of his ancestors, which are all played by Antonio Banderas, including the women. And there's some pretty funny situations there where it doesn't feel like Banderas is trying too hard for laughs. It's mostly just place him in the situation, because frankly, this is a role that Banderas could do in his sleep, of just presenting that type of character. But the fact that he's playing multiple roles there and trying to go out of his way to seem a little bit crazy and a little bit more greedy while trying to outsmart Paddington does make him a pretty good antagonist, and he does kind of fit well into this world. Now, that said, I had no qualms about whether or not Olivia Colman would mesh well into her role as this deceptive nun character with her big toothy grin and her ability to apparently just play the guitar and just toss it into the air and defy the laws of gravity for a little bit. She fits like a glove into this world as the perfect kind of unsuspecting antagonist in this film. So yeah, there's not as many colorful characters here. Usually the Paddington films, they take place in the UK, and they have a fair amount of surprising characters who show up here and there, and a few returning characters are present in minor roles here. But there are not as many present. There's fewer guest stars here. That said, the primary guest is mostly just Banderas and Coleman, and they're pretty fun for this type of adventure. And then, of course, you have Paddington doing all his usual slapstick where, a boat trip goes awry and, exploring the ancient ruins has him running from boulders. And, there's a little nod to silent films with how a wall falls down on Paddington and he's perfectly positioned with the window. Just great little nods here and there to a silent classic stars. While never feeling like it's trying too hard to just reference all the old classics here, because it could do the same thing with adventure films in general, with how it focuses on trekking through the jungle and trying to find this gold. But you know, it kept up its charm. You know, Paddington never lost his way. Like he still has like a mission here, but he never loses sight of, you know, his Aunt Lucy and what matters most to him in life, and also preserving that kind of like good-natured philosophy, which makes him just such a fun hero that even this kind of adventure film can't ruin him. So I think Paddington in Peru is a good film. It's not as great as Paddington 2, but like, you know, Paddington 2 way high up there. Paddington in Peru is probably a little bit further down. Not quite as down as like the first Paddington film. And I think it's mostly just because there's some fun sequences here. There's more action and excitement. And just the overall tone, I think, you know, it still preserved this, you know, this building of character that, you know, even I could see someone saying this is like the lesser of Paddington films just because of the premise alone. But I think, you know, this trilogy is actually pretty solid, from Paddington 1 to Paddington to Peru. And just like good-natured adventure films with that are not boring. That like you could easily watch this like with the entire family and not be bored by it. Just it's easy to be warmed by Paddington's charms just because he means well, and the sequences that he stumbles into are just so intricately assembled with such colorful characters that all that whimsy and just that lovable nature is still perfectly preserved as marmalade. So yeah, Paddington in Peru, it still has some of that good charm left.